Week 4 of the high school football season is upon us, joined by Nick Fox again, and we've got a ton to talk about, so not going to waste any time. But before we get into the games, Nick, give me one player you're excited to watch this week.
Without a doubt, it's got to be Ankeny Centennial's quarterback, Trenton Smith. He's going down into the Ram country, their brand-new stadium, and he's got a tough task. The Rams are looking really, really good once again this year. And he's going to have to perform. We'll talk about this here shortly, but that's who I'm going to be watching this week. What about you?
Yeah, Trenton Smith, congrats to him for breaking the Ankeny Centennial single-game passing touchdown record. He threw 6 against Cedar Falls last week in a big win, so congrats to him. But I'm going to go Kyler Girardi. I mean, that's a number 3 versus number 2 matchup in Class 4A over there, and Girardi is just his numbers are insane. 85% completion percentage through the air, 600 yards throwing, 400 yards rushing. 13 total touchdowns, no interceptions. Has yet to turn the ball over. So he's a crazy athlete, North Dakota State commit. So he's a ton of fun to watch, and that's a big game over there in Class 4A. But before we get to that one, we're gonna hop right into our classes, starting with Class 5A. The game I kind of have marked down right here. Johnson and Ankeny, two teams that kind of need a win right now. They're kind of towards the back end of our top 10. Two teams that have Johnson obviously picked up a win over Valley last week, but two teams that could really use this one. And it's a big-time receiver battle. Nick, both teams have a receiver with 300-plus yards and 4 touchdowns. And revenge time for Ankeny. Lost to Johnson in the 5A quarterfinal, 23-13. So Ankeny's lost 2 in a row. They've drawn the top 2 teams the last 2 weeks, so pretty tough draw there. So perfect game for them to get back into a win column, not facing a perennial title contender. So, their defense is averaging 43 points allowed after those 2 games against the top 2 teams. So Luke Anderson, he's going to look to get going, and Devin Akers, he's obviously one of the better receiving threats in Class 5A. Switching over to Johnston, they nice win over Valley last week. Valley still winless to this point, but nevertheless they pick up that victory. 5 interceptions as a team is tied for first in Class 5A. And Will Nuss, he is finding his favorite target, Jacob Simpson, pretty often. 321 yards and 5 touchdowns receiving. 5 touchdowns for Simpson. Nuss has 7 total touchdowns throwing, so a lot of them are going to Simpson, and for good reason. My pick, I think I'm going to go Johnson here. I don't know. Obviously, I know Ankeny's a good team, losing to number 1 and number 2, but I'm going to go Johnson here. Nick, what do you got?
I think we have to agree with you with Johnson. This team just looks really good. I think they kind of just lost their footing a little bit against Cedar Falls. I didn't really, if Cedar Falls is a great team, that's not a bad loss at all. I think Johnson's going to start being that Johnson team that we expected him to be before the season. Obviously, Will Nuss and Jacob Simpson are clicking on every level. This team looks really, really nice, and this would be a great win for them. Ankeny's a really good team, and these CIML matchups have been just ridiculous. So that's my pick, Johnson. Speaking of the CIML clashes, we'll go to Ankeny Centennial and Southeast Polk, the game I will be on the field doing some recording and pictures for. I'm really excited to watch that. We have number 6, Ankeny Centennial, is headed to number 1, Southeast Polk. This is Southeast Polk's 4th straight ranked opponent so far. They faced, at the time, number 2 Valley, number 8 Ankeny, and number 3 Cedar Rapids Prairie. And they've really taken care of those 3 teams.
Yeah.
Valley was a pretty close game, but Ankeny and Prairie weren't exactly that close. Centennial's coming off a blowout win against Cedar Falls. So they're coming in red hot to this game. Ankeny Centennial, this is another great QB battle. Trenton Smith, so far he's got 596 yards and 11 touchdowns, like you said. Broke the school record. That was really cool. Really cool to watch. Cole Piper, he's been leading the way on the defense with 27.5 tackles. And Centennial's scored 42 points in their last 2 games. So you can see this offense is really starting to get going. And, they were really good in that Ankeny game as well. They just, they lost in the double overtime, and that was just unfortunate. And then moving over to Southeast Polk, this team has been on the front cover of just about every high school football thing you can read for Iowa. Connor Moberly, the Iowa State commit, he's got 679 yards and 12 touchdowns. He's 50 for 74 completion. He has just been ridiculous. I mean, he has been doing every single thing right. And it really helps when you got that quarterback. They got two 200-plus yard receivers with Carson Robbins and Sam Zelenovich. So, Moberly's finding his guys. They've been having a really efficient offense so far. And my pick for this game, I'm going to go Ankeny Centennial. I think if there's a team other than Dowling that could possibly beat Southeast Polk, I think it's Centennial. Trenton Smith, I think that he's going to ride this momentum that he's got after his Cedar Falls game, and he's going to have himself a day, maybe even a career day out there at Southeast Polk. Who are you picking for this game?
Yeah, I tell you what, Ankeny Centennial, they're a few inches away from being 3-0 and probably top 5, top 3 if that game against Ankeny just one or two plays flips the other way. But I like the upset pick. I was going to say I want to be the team that picks against Southeast Polk, but it's not going to be this week, Nick. Sorry. I think Southeast Polk, I think they're just dominant. I think all roads are aligning to that Week 8 matchup against Dowling. So I like the pick. I think Ankeny Centennial can put up some points against this defense if anybody can. Like you said, Trenton Smith and company, they've been scoring a lot. So I like the pick, but I'm going to go Southeast Polk. But props to you for picking against against the top dog. But switching onward to our third and final Class 5A matchup, we're going to preview number 7 Prairie and number 4 Pleasant Valley, hopping out of the CIML, heading over to Eastern Iowa. Pleasant Valley is looking to get hot. Winners of the last two versus Kennedy and Liberty, and Prairie kind of the opposite end, looking to bounce back after getting kind of trounced at Southeast Polk. And Pleasant Valley is a team that's not going to throw the ball, only thrown the ball 17 times in 3 games, and only 7 of those have been completed. They got 4 rushers with 100-plus yards this year. Tage Lyon and Coy Kipper both have over 200 and averaging over 6 yards per carry, so a good running attack there. And the defense has forced 8 turnovers in 3 games, so they're going to rely on running the ball and controlling the clock. And switching to Prairie, kind of a big 3 at each skill position. You got the quarterback, Will Phillips, running back Casey Kelly, and wide receiver Apollo Payne. Each of those guys kind of leading their team statistically ahead of the rest. So they're going to rely on that big 3. I like Pleasant Valley in this one. They gave up 500 passing yards to Graham Beckman last week, still were able to get the win. I'm going to go Pleasant Valley here. I think they're kind of sustained as a top 5 team in Class 5A. Nick?
I'm going to go Prairie with this one. I really like the way that Cedar Rapids Prairie has played this year, other than obviously that Southeast Polk game. But, if you take that away, they've been playing some really, really good football. Will Phillips, he's been great this season so far, and I think that I'm going to be looking for them to get a little bit of an upset, kind of get their feet back under them after losing a big one to Southeast Polk out there in Pleasant Hill, and I think we're going to see Cedar Rapids Prairie put on a show, and they're going to take down one of the top 5 teams.
Perfect. And before we hop over to Class 4A, want to mention we got the battle for the boot in Class 5A, Iowa City West at Iowa City High. The last 2 matchups have not been good, Nick. City High has won the last 2 combined 105-0. I would be very surprised if that's the case this year. It is at City High Batesfield, super historic there. That one's going to be a ton of fun. I'm going to be there shooting that one, so I'm super excited. Nick, just quick reaction, quick thoughts. Who do you got, West or City High?
I'm going to go Iowa City West. You know what? I don't care about the lopsided performance there. City West has been kind of a quiet team. They've been solid so far this year. And I'm going Iowa City West. I think they're going to pull this one off. What about you?
Ooh, I don't know. I'm not going to pick this one. I'm going to be there. I want it to be a good game. I'm not going to pick because I think it's going to be that close, super contested. Jack Wallace dueling City High and their kind of rotation of quarterbacks. I think it is at this point. I haven't dug in too much, but I know they've kind of rotated guys with Bacon and Larson and whatnot. So that one's going to be a ton of fun. Hopping over to Class 4A, where we got a ton of good games. I mean, the 3 games we got here are really, really good. 3 top 10 matchups, starting with Norwalk and ADM. I like what you put here, Nick, in our notes. Unstoppable force versus immovable object. Norwalk's pretty good defense against ADM's really good offense, and 1,000-yard passer with a 1,000 total yard quarterback clash in this one too. Starting with Norwalk, one of 3 guys in the state of Iowa at this point with 1,000-plus passing yards is Aiden Harder. He's got 10 touchdowns through the air to add to it. Eli Robbins, his favorite target, 433 yards receiving for him, and then they are off to a 3-0 start, and they finished with 5 wins last season, so they're well on their way to capping what they did last year, and I can see that team exceeding that 5-win total with a guy like Harder at the helm. And switching to ADM, you're going to be without Brevin Dole for a while, which sucks, but you got a guy in Aiden Flora who just about carried you to a win over against Lewis Central last week. I was there. It was crazy. He ran for 330-something yards, threw for another almost 100. He had 3 touchdowns. I mean, they're going to need to really play off of him, and I think Norwalk knows that. But that's the thing with Flora is I think everyone knows it's going to him, and he's still going to find a way to beat you. So it's going to be really a challenge for ADM. How are they going to pivot, without Dole? What other guys are going to step up? It's going to be interesting to see that. And, a good chance for ADM to bounce back. You were number 1. You lose to Lewis Central. You drop out of number 1. But now you get a shot to get a top 10 victory against Norwalk. I'm going to pick ADM. I'm a fan of Flora. I liked what I saw last week. I might be biased because I haven't seen Norwalk yet, so based on the numbers, they look good. But I'm going to go ADM in a bounce-back win. Nick?
I kind of talked about this with a different game last week, and I'm going to stick with it. Defense wins championships. I've been really impressed with how Norwalk has played so far, and it doesn't hurt when your offense also has a 1,000-yard passer through 3 games.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go and take Norwalk in this one. I hate picking against ADM. I love this team. I love Aiden Flora and Brevin Dahl, and it just hurt my heart to see Brevin Dahl go down with a broken arm. But I'm going to go with Norwalk in this one. That's my pick. And we'll move on to our next game in Class 4A. Number 4, Lewis Central, is headed out to number 8, Bondurant. Bondurant is averaging 20-plus more points per game than Lewis Central. So there is quite a big difference in offensive numbers there. This is their first ever matchup between these top 4A teams, according to Bound. So let's take a look at Lewis Central. Curtis Whitty last week versus number 1 ADM. He had 138 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. He had just an incredible game. Big time. It was the lights were bright and he shined through. Definitely, there were some really cool videos you got. I loved watching those. He's a star, and this is their 4th straight ranked opponent this season, after they've played Harlan, Creston, and, of course, ADM last week. So Lewis Central, they've won plenty. They've won more than they've lost in these ranked matchups they've had so far early in the season. Moving to Bondurant, Titus Cram, is he the Heisman of high school so far? 525 yards and 5 rushing touchdowns so far. And the Bondurant defense, they got 10 sacks and 3 interceptions so far. So although they've got the fancy offense numbers, the defense is still holding their own and helping to support the offense. And this one, I want to go Bondurant. I think that's what I'm going to do. I
like it.
Lewis Central's a really good team, but Titus Cram, he is the real deal. I think that he's going to have a legacy game this week. I think he's going to do really good, so that's my pick, Bondurant. What do you got?
Yeah, I like it. I like how you brought up how Lewis Central, their schedule. I was going to make a graphic about that this week. I mean, if they can go 3-1 with a Harlan, Creston, ADM, and Bondurant schedule, that's pretty impressive. And a team that we didn't really know much about going into this year with a loss at quarterback and some skill guys. But I'm going to go Lewis Central here. Again, it might be biased because what I saw last week, I really liked how they played. Curtis Whitty's a dog. Hetzel is a really good quarterback. I really liked watching him play, and they're really good defensively. So I'm going to go Lewis Central. I wouldn't be surprised if this is one that's going to be like 45-41. So I'm going to kind of expect a high scoring affair here. I'm going to go Lewis Central, but I like the Bondurant pick too. I think they're a lot better than a number 8 team, and most people would agree with that. But moving on to our final one, and might be the best one of all three. Number 2, Western Dubuque at number 3, North Scott, a top 3 matchup in Class 4A this week. North Scott hasn't played a one-possession game yet. They've been dominant. And Western Dubuque, obviously, 2 good wins and then a loss to Xavier last week in a close one. But at Western Dubuque, they're led by Grant Glausher, 500 yards on the ground, 5 touchdowns. He's on pace for 1,000 already. But he was held to just 81 yards and no touchdowns in their loss to Xavier last week. So they're going to look to get him back on track. And I tell you what, quarterback Tanner Anderson is having a year, 583 yards passing, 8 touchdowns, 0 picks so far for him. So he's been a great game manager and leader for that team, and 14 fumble recoveries for Western Dubuque. So they're turning the ball over well as well. Switching over to North Scott, my player to watch, Kyler Girardi. I'm not going to talk about him too much. 1,100 total yards, 13 total touchdowns. He's just a threat all over the place, and North Scott has won 5 of 9 historically. So I'm going to go North Scott here. I think they kind of make a statement. They're number 1 in some polls I saw online in Class 4A, and I totally agree with that. I can see multiple teams being number one in Class 4A right now. So I'm going to go North Scott. I think they make a case for number one, and I think they might be able to make that jump this week alone. Nick?
Yeah, I'll agree with you on this one. I think North Scott, I think they're a little bit undervalued in our polls right now, even though they're still ranked number 3.
Right,
I think they deserve to be a top 2 team, maybe even number 1. I think that they've been fantastic. Like you said, Kyle Girardi, he has been just a star. He's been so fun to watch, and watch his numbers just continue to go up and up week by week. And, Western Dubuque is a really respectable team, and obviously if there's a team to beat North Scott, Western Dubuque will be one of them. But, I've really loved this North Scott team. They've been stellar, and I think that they're going to pick up a huge win here. So I've got North Scott for that one, and we'll move on to Class 3A now. Our first game to watch for Class 3A is number 6, Nevada, and number 12, Hampton-Dumont Cal. This is 2 undefeated teams. Hampton-Dumont Cal, they are looking to get a big boost in the ranks. Nevada is just looking to solidify their ranks. They've been really solid this year, and with a win here, they could even find themselves into the top 5 looking at Nevada. Jacob Kunzrath, last week versus PCM, he had 4 catches, 111 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So he had a really nice week last week. 14 total points allowed this season for their defense, which has been really impressive. 3A is similar to 4A. They're just a stacked class, so many great teams. So that's pretty impressive for them. Kaysen Stevenson this season, he's got 504 yards, 4 touchdowns. We haven't really talked about him a whole lot, but shout out to Kaysen Stevenson. He's having himself a really good year. Looking at HDC, Gavin Meter, 563 total yards and 13 total touchdowns. So getting it done through the air and with his legs. And last week they had 6 sacks against West Marshall. So they've been able to have some success on both sides of the ball for this one. I'm gonna go with Nevada. This has been one of my favorite 3A teams to watch. I really enjoy watching them, and they just keep on winning. They keep on coming, and I think that they're going to have another great week against another ranked opponent. What do you got?
Yeah, I'm going to go Hampton-Dumont Cal. A little bit of an upset here. Again, I'll talk about them again. They got a great Instagram page. They always post their clips, so hopefully they watch this and can see me pick them. But it's not even just for that. This team can score. They scored 30 points in every week, and they scored 40 in 2 of them. So this team's going to put up points. I think it's going to be one of those shootouts with Kaysen Stevenson and Meter and them going back and forth. Meter with 13 touchdowns on the year, and they got a good running back, Brody Walton, who's ran for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns. So I think it's a really balanced attack. I like picking teams that can throw the ball and also use the ground. So I'm going to go with them. A little bit of an upset, but I'm going to go with Hampton-Dumont Cal. Switching over to Solon and Mount Vernon, number 11 versus number 2. Solon has really dominated this series, 14-2 historically, but Mount Vernon has won the last 2 games. So that trend's starting to switch. And I think if I saw on Twitter, this is the last game at Mount Vernon's old stadium. I'm not sure 100% on that. I saw somebody message me and said that, so going to say that with a grain of salt. But Solon, they're getting hot after dropping their first game of the year. Defense has allowed just 9 points in their last 2 games, and Brett White's the leader of that defense, 29.5 total tackles and 9 for loss. And last week was the first game of the season. They scored more than 7. They put up 41, so they really exceeded that, and their offense looked good, and a perfect time to right before you got to square off with the top 2 team. And that team is Mount Vernon. I mean, solid win over Benton last week, 19-7. Benton was number 10. I think that's a good team in Benton to win by that. That team was going to control the clock and run the ball, and I think they did that and kept it close, but Mount Vernon obviously still picking up the win. Miles Francois leading the defense, 16 tackles for him, 5.5 sacks. And the star under center, Joey Romberg, 600 total yards and 9 total touchdowns for him. Jackson Hurd added 140 on the ground last week. But this is one I could see Solon. This is a team in Solon that's kind of played in those big games a lot. I'm pretty sure Mount Vernon knocked this Solon team out of the playoffs last year to go to the Dome, if I remember correctly. I want to pick Solon here, but I'm going to go Mount Vernon. I think they're a little too good this year. I think they are one of the perennials in Class 3A, and I think their winless season does not start here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Mount Vernon's going to get it done this week. Solon is a great team. I went and watched them against Clear Creek Amana down there in Solon, and I thought that they were a solid team. It was good to see last week their offense starting to get it going. I mean, the defense, watching their defense is just suffocating every play. It doesn't matter if you're running the ball or passing the ball, they're bringing the pressure. And if they can get the offense going like they did last week, I think they could beat Mount Vernon, but I just don't think that's going to happen. One stat that I have here is that Mount Vernon has 16 sacks this season, which is 13 more than Solon. So I've been really impressed, and it's kind of a quiet Mount Vernon defense that I wasn't really, I didn't really know that they were like that, I guess. So I'm going to take Mount Vernon in this one as well. I think they're going to get the job done. And with that, we'll move on to our final game in Class 3A, which is number 1 Williamsburg headed to number 13 Fort Madison. Fort Madison, they're looking to gain some respect with a shot at the top team in 3A, and Williamsburg is just trying to stay hot after a 29-point victory over CCA. They've been really hot, of course, ever since the Cedar Rapids Xavier team. This has been all the craze of 3A. So far for Williamsburg, Kellen Cockrell is a star. He's been just under 600 passing yards and 12 passing touchdowns so far this season. The defense for Williamsburg has been bringing the pressure. They've got 13 sacks, 22 total tackles for loss, and 3 fumble recoveries. So this has been a team that's, they're getting it done on both sides of the ball. They've been elite on either side. And Kellen Cockrell's been spreading the love as well. 3 receivers with 119-plus yards. So he's not, he's got some favorite targets, but he's definitely not shying away from letting a few other receivers have it. And looking over at Fort Madison, the Bloodhounds, they have a weapon of their own at QB in Marcus Guzman. He's got 714 total yards with 10 total touchdowns. So he's been really solid so far, obviously, this season. They're looking for their first ranked win of the season. They're 3-0 so far, but all 3 of those teams have been unranked, so they're looking to gain a lot of respect with this one, obviously, a shot at the number 1 team. That's a really big opportunity for them, and they're off to another hot start of the season. Could this put them in the playoff picture with a big win here? I personally don't think so, looking at it from a glance, but for this one, I'm going to take Williamsburg here. They seem like such a dominant team. This is my current favorite to win the Class 3A title, so I'm going to take Williamsburg with this one. Who was your prediction for this game?
I love the Bloodhounds as a mascot. That's pretty sick.
Yeah, I thought
that's pretty cool.
Well,
I didn't recognize that, but no, like you said, Fort Madison 3-0, wins against 3 unranked teams, and 2 of them have been by like 3 and 4 points. So really skating by. If Fort Madison is to stay in this, it's going to need to be a low-scoring game because I don't think they're going to win in a shootout with Williamsburg. I tell you what, I'm looking at their stats. 78 rush attempts so far for Fort Madison, and they have their running backs have a long rush of 7 and 6 yards, which is not usually a sign of a great run game. So I think if Fort Madison is to win this, they're going to need to make it ugly. It's going to need to be one of those sloppy games. It works out. It's in Fort Madison, so you get to bring the number 1 team to you. So that's what they got going for them. But I think Williamsburg handily wins this one. Pretty confident in that one. With that, moving on to Class 2A, our 2 favorite games in this class. Number 8, Western Christian at number 9, Cherokee. 2 sneaky teams who kind of came out of nowhere in 2A this year, and frankly, 2A anywhere from 8 down has just been a mess. I've been messaging our 2A ranker. There's just been teams shuffling in and out, and it feels like every time we bring a team in the top 16, they lose. But these 2 teams have found a way to join our rankings and stick around. And, I mean, looking at the stats, you can see why. Cherokee's averaging 45 points per game. Quarterback Jackson Palshrud and John Jennis on their running back, each on pace to have 1,000 rushing yards. And the team has 18 rushing touchdowns to 3 passing touchdowns. So that's a team that's going to want to keep it on the ground. And compared to Western Christian, where Caden Van Regenmorter has been a good game manager, 358 yards through the air, 3 touchdowns, no picks. And running back Tyler Mantell, he's got 364 on the ground. And their story is really their defense, forcing 6 turnovers so far. They've held their opponents to some low scoring numbers. This one's a toss-up. I think you can go either way. I wouldn't be surprised either way. I'm going to go Cherokee. I like how they can put up points. I like how they got 2 guys that have really been carrying them offensively, and Palstrad and Jenis. So I'm going to go with them. Nick, what do you got?
I'm going to take Western Christians this game.
Sneak it up. There you go.
I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna take Western Christian. I think Tyler Mantle is gonna have an awesome game. I think that their defense is gonna be the story here. I think they're gonna hold Cherokee to a low scoring game for them. So that's my pick. I'm gonna take Western Christian for that one. But that'll be a great game. I really like that game. It'll be interesting to see how that one turns out. And we move on to our second and final game for Class 2A is number 3 Monticello is headed to Anamosa. Anamosa has started the season at 2-1, and they hadn't won 2 games in a season since 2020. So this has been a pretty solid start for them. They've only won 1 game in the last few seasons, so that's pretty awesome. It's really cool to see that they've been able to get that great start to the season after having not so much success over the last few years. Looking at Monticello, Preston Rice so far, 915 total yards and 9 total touchdowns. He has been just a freak so far, and we knew that going into the season. He was going to have a great year, and he's showing it so far. Peyton Schilling, 362 yards and 6 touchdowns receiving. So definitely Preston's favorite target there. They've been a great duo so far this season. And looking at Anamosa, Austin Scranton, 366 yards, 2 touchdowns receiving, and this is the best start to their season in a few years. That's what I've really loved to see, is that a team that hasn't had a lot of success recently has just been able to kind of come out of the woodwork out of nowhere and have a great start to the year and kind of get their hopes up for maybe a successful season. So I'm going to take Monticello in this one, although I think Preston Rice is just too bright of a star to not help his team a lot here and help him get a win. So I'm going to take Monticello. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think Rise having that many yards after a first game where he really struggled against Mount Vernon and kind of got nothing going offensively. So for him to have that many yards and touchdowns at this point is pretty impressive. He's had a great 2 weeks. So I'm going to agree with you. I think Monticello is the pick here. Anamosa, congrats on a great start after a few years struggling, but I think Monticello is going to take this one. Moving to 1A, a few classes left here. Starting off with Underwood at AHSTW. This would have been a top 5 matchup, but AHSTW kind of fell in an OT loss to 2A Kemper, really close game. And Underwood winners of 2 in a row, one of 1A's kind of title contenders. And this matchup has been even the last 4 years, 2-2 split. Starting with Underwood, I just love talking about this team because they've got so many of their great baseball players out. I love seeing when kids are playing multiple sports, and their quarterback is an Iowa baseball commit, which is always cool. Garrett Lowett. Second in passing yards in Class 1A with 697 of them. And Mason Boothby, another baseball player, he is third in receiving yards in Class 1A with 292 and 4 touchdowns. 5 interceptions as a team through 3 weeks as well, so this team's going to turn you over. They're 2-1, one loss to a Van Meter team, a class ahead of them that's kind of starting to put the stopping on some really good teams. So that loss is, although it's a loss, it's going to look good in the long run. So I really like Underwood, and kind of switching to AHSTW. Suckup and Sternberg is kind of a 2-headed horse in the backfield, both with 300-plus yards so far and averaging 8 yards per carry. Always a good number to have. And Sternberg, 2 kickoff returns already this year. I caught that in the stats. It's pretty interesting, so watch out if you're on Underwood's kickoff team. But I'm going to go Underwood here. I think they're one of my favorite teams in Class 1A. I love their their ability to throw it and also run it. They're a ton of fun to watch. I always see highlights on Twitter of them. So I'm going to go Underwood. Nick, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm definitely going Underwood here. I think AHSTW has been a great, they've had a good season so far, but Underwood, they've had a lot of great success in the last few seasons, and I think that they're going to continue that. I think they're going to get a big win here, another a top 10 victory, and Underwood has been a solid team. They're definitely, like you said, one of those title contender teams that I've really liked to watch, so I'm definitely going to be looking for them some more success this week. And so moving on to our next Class 1A team, our final Class 1A team we're going to talk about is number 2. MFL MarMac is headed to number 12 Applington Parkersburg. MFL MarMac avoided an upset bid to New Hampton last week. The Falcons Lone loss is to the number 1 Grundy Center. I was there for that game last week, and Grundy Center just looks, as good as ever. They're really good. So, that's a good loss for them. MFL, they've got 4 guys with 20-plus carries on this squad, so definitely not afraid of the rush attack for them. They're led by Quinn McCoe with 295 yards and 29 tackles for loss as a team. That is 4th in Class 1A. So this team has had a lot of success so far. I like that stat, the 4 guys with 20-plus carries. It's not just one running back getting all the carries. They've got they're spreading the love for that. And looking at Applington Parkersburg, Gavin Thomas and Cale Schoeneman rushing for 200 yards so far and 6 interceptions as a team defensively. So this is definitely going to be a defensive battle. I think this is going to be a low-scoring game, with Applington Parkersburg bringing the heat, the no-fly zone out there in the field, and MFL MarMac bringing bringing the pressure down in the backfield. So I think my pick for this one is going to be MFL MarMac. They've definitely solidified themselves as one of the powerhouses this year. I think they're going to just keep on rolling. This train's going to keep moving. So that's my pick for this week. How about you?
Yeah, I'm going to go Applington Parkersburg. A little bit of a bigger upset here. MFL MarMac kind of worried me, losing to New Hampton in the third quarter, I believe it was. I like Applington Parkersburg. It's a team with a lot of tradition. 1 loss to Grundy Center. They've played other teams close, got some good wins. It's a team that probably should be higher than number 12. Just an early season loss is going to knock you down a good bunch. But I think that's more of a top 10 team than we think right now. So I'm going to go Applington Parkersburg. I love Thomas, love Schoeneman, and their defense just plays good ball. And so I'm going to go with them. A little bit of an upset pick there before we hop into Class A, where we have a huge matchup in Class A. Number 3 Madrid at number 1 Lynnville Sully. I tell you what, I think we're the one poll that has Madrid as high as they are. A lot of other polls, I always check the other polls just to compare to ours, see where we're different from other news outlets and whatnot, because you always will be. And Madrid, I've never seen them higher than number 3, sitting usually around 8 or 9 in other polls. So Madrid, 2 1-point victories thus far. 2 good wins, Mount Ayr, Woodward Granger, those 1-point wins. And Lynnville Sully is without Quarterdown Harder. We never like talking about stars being out, but it's something you got to bring up. Quarterdown Harder is going to be out for the rest of the regular season. The good news is looks like he'll be back for the postseason, which is always a good news. Starting with Madrid, Preston Wicker is a great game manager at quarterback, 64% through the air and a 4-0 touchdown to interception ratio. Huge threat with his legs. I'm pretty sure he leads that team in rushing with 439 yards, and 2 others have carried the load for 200+. So really balanced attack through the ground. Wicker can beat you with his arm. Really like that team. And 20 tackles for loss thus far for the Tigers defense. So Madrid, really, really stout team. I like how they've played close games. I like that. Winning close games is always key later down the stretch. And switching to Lynnville Sully, CJ Nickel and Landon Montgomery need to be big on the ground. Montgomery, I saw he had like a 91-yard touchdown against Pleasantville last week in a nice win where I saw some people picking Pleasantville. And that Eagles defense is second in the class in sacks and tackles for loss. So they're going to rely on their defense without Noun Harder. It's Lynnville Sully's homecoming game. As far as a pick goes, I think I'm going to go Madrid. I think we're going to have a new number 1 team. We've had a number 1 team lose the last 2 weeks. I'm going to go Madrid. I think they take down the new number 1 Lynnville Sully team. Nick, what do you think here?
I would love to pick Madrid here, especially with Sully's quarterback out. He's been, a big part of that team so far, but I think Lynnville Sully's going to keep on coming. There's just a different sort of atmosphere on those homecoming nights.
Yeah.
So I think the crowd's going to play a little bit of a part there as much as it can. I think their defense is going to be the biggest story for this one. I think that they're going to just bring the heat on Madrid, and I think there's just going to be too much pressure for them. I love that Madrid's so high. I think that they're a great team, but I just don't think this is the week for them. And we'll move on to our final game for Class A. We have ACGC is headed to number 6 SCC. ACGC is 3-0 and right outside of our top 16, so they are just on the cusp of getting into our rankings, and a win here would definitely get them into it. SCC recently beat then number 5 Southwest Valley by 40 points. Wow, that's a little bit of a blowout there. ACGC, they've thrown the ball just 8 times this season, and 2 of them have been intercepted. They have 4 guys with 190-plus rushing yards. Their team is averaging 6.7 yards per carry. I love seeing all these teams this season that just are not throwing the ball. They refuse to do it. They're sticking with the ground game through and through. I love to watch that. I think it's just really interesting. It's kind of something that you wouldn't see at college or NFL. It's just kind of a high school thing. I think that's kind of interesting. Looking at SEC, Gavin Bada is 4th in Class A in passing yards with 606. He barely snuck by Riverside last week with a 6-point win. It'll be interesting to see if they can bounce back after that. They've got a bit of a higher standard for themselves, but I think this week I'm going to go with ACGC. I think this has been a team that's looked really good, and they're getting really hot, and they want to get into the top 16. They want to get into these rankings. They want people to know that they're the real deal. So I'm going to go with ACGC. I love the ground game that they have. I think that's really cool. And SEC's very slim loss to Riverside last week kind of worries me, which kind of, that's kind of the finishing punch that tells me that I think ACGC will win this one. Who are you picking?
I agree. I think the Riverside win by just 6 was a little concerning. I was shocked when I saw that score, but I'm still going to go South Central Calhoun. A little bit biased because I'm kind of from that area. I've seen these kids play 7-on-7. I like Gavin Bada. I think he's one of the more underrated prospects as far as quarterback goes in the state of Iowa. So I'm going to go South Central Calhoun. I think they keep the wheels going and keep their undefeated season going. They got a matchup with West Hancock in a few weeks, I believe, at their place. It's going to be a ton of fun. But I'm going to go South Central Calhoun here. Switching to our final class for today, Class 8-man. Still got some good games, even though it's our last class. Still some really good ones here. Starting with Moravia and Southeast Warren. Southeast Warren 4-0 in the series, winning all the games by 28-plus points. Something tells me that's not going to hold up this year. They have a common opponent so far in Montezuma. Moravia beat Montezuma by 2. Southeast Warren lost to them by 19. So you can kind of see a little bit of an edge if you kind of like comparing that type of stuff. In Moravia, obviously they got Shane Helmick. We've talked about him on this show before. 6th in passing yards in Class 8-man with 705. He's got a good ratio of 15-4 with his touchdowns and interceptions. He's also leading the team in rushing by a long shot, which you see more in 8-man than any other class, which I love. Switching over to Southeast Warren, Jamison Ewing and Trey Fisher. They're going to rely on the ground. Both those guys have 300-plus yards rushing this far. 8 interceptions in 3 games for that defense. 3 for Trey Fisher himself, which is pretty cool. I'm going to go Moravia here. I like Helmick. I like relying on like the star in 8-man because usually the star is the one that's racking up all the yards. So I'm going to go Moravia here. Nick, do you see it any other way?
No, I agree with you with this one. I completely agree with I'm on the Shane Helmick hype train. I have been since last season, and I think Moravia just gets the job done here. I really like what you said about the stars really shine, especially in 8-man, and we'll definitely get to talking about that in our next game as well for 8-man. So I think that especially Shane Helmick is going to keep, he's going to keep his success going. It'll be a big win for Moravia and maybe a boost in the rankings. At that, and we'll head to our final game of the show and our final game of 8-man. We have number 2 Winfield-Mt Union and number 10 Montezuma. Montezuma is winners of their last 7 in this series, so they've kind of been dominant in that sense. The game is set for Saturday afternoon. I kind of like the Saturday games.
Yeah.
There might be a few folks, especially the Buffington family, him being an Iowa commit. I have to miss that Iowa game. Sorry, guys. Winfield-Mt Union, looking at them, obviously Cam Buffington, what we talked about, the stars of 8-man. He's definitely been taking control. Averaging 10 yards per carry after 3 games, 33 yards per catch after 3 games as well. So he's been stellar. He's got also 37 tackles after these 3 games so far. So, another one of those guys, they play both positions and they can just thrive in each. That's just a complete athlete. And also for Winfield-Mt Union, Cole Milks at running back is adding an extra threat. He's got 211 yards rushing so far. And looking at Montezuma, their sophomore, Brady Bolton is a star. He is 5th in passing yards in 8-man with 727. And how about a 7-0 touchdown to interception ratio? You don't see that all that much.
17.
what did I say, 7?
7, yeah, 17 to 0.
Me.
That's almost hard to believe.
0.
Yeah.
Holy smokes, 17 to 0. That's just mind-boggling. That's really cool. And Bolton also has a punt return for a touchdown this season. His favorite target is Garrett Watts, is tied for a lead in 8-man with 9 receiving touchdowns. So really 2 impressive squads so far this year. I love these 8-man numbers when we look at them because they're just so inflated compared to the other classes. I'm going to go with the Winfield-Mt Union. I'm going to stick with my word on the Stars taking control. Cam Buffington, he has been having another great year like we expected him to this season. And I think that he's going to keep that going yet another week. I think they're going to get a big win on Montezuma. I think Montezuma is still going to keep it close. I don't think it's going to be a blowout by any means, but I'm picking Winfield-Mt Union. And who is your pick for this last game?
I tell you what, 8-man is really deep. I could see there's going to be a lot of top seeds going down in the 8-man playoffs just because there's a lot of good teams around this area. I'm going to go Montezuma. We like picking stars, and I think Brady Bolton is one. I mean, where do you have your quarterback returning punts for touchdowns? That's pretty nuts. I thought the 17 to 0 touchdown to interception ratio was crazy. And I tell you what, Winfield-Mt Union, they played that pretty low-scoring game against Waco last week in the top 5 matchup, winning that 34-6. I don't think you're going to hold Brady Bolton off the scoreboard like you were able to against Waco. So I'm going to go Brady Bolton. I think he's going to put up points, and I think that Montezuma team is going to make a statement this week. Nick, before we go, one final segment. We've kind of briefly brought it up. Give me one number 1 team that you can see that you are going to predict losing this week. I know you said it, but I want to hear it again.
I spoiled it a little bit earlier, but I'm picking Ankeny Centennial over over Southeast Polk. I think Southeast Polk is the team to fall this week, just because I think Trenton Smith is riding high, man. He has been really, really solid. Obviously breaking the school record like we talked about earlier in the show. I really like this Ankeny Centennial team. I think that first loss to Ankeny was really hard, especially being a crosstown rivalry. But I really think that they're going to start proving themselves to be a title contender. I think that they're a really great team. They've got the stars and the pieces to win it all over, and I'll be really excited that I get to see that with the best seats in the house. And I believe you wanted to talk about which game are you going to be taking for the number 1 to be falling this week? Yeah,
I also spoiled it a little earlier in the show, but I got Madrid taking down Lynnville solely. A little bit of an upset, not as big as yours, I'd say. I'd say yours would be massive, but Madrid nonetheless. Preston Wicker, Tyler Fuller, I think there's stars all around, and I think they take advantage of a Lynnville solely team without Noun Harder. They only got 1 week without him, so they're still kind of new to playing without their star. So I'm going to take Madrid, and I think they kind of take over as the new number 1 team in Class A. But only one way to find out if these are correct. Absolutely. We got to wait for tomorrow night. Super excited. We hope you guys enjoyed tuning in to Talk IA Week 4 preview. Crazy we're that far into the season already.
It's unbelievable.
But nonetheless, we're going to have tons of scores coming out, highlights and all that. And like always, be sure to give us a follow on social media. So appreciate you guys for tuning in.